All right, I'm going to talk about one of the exciting young wide receivers in the NFL, a guy that I was very excited about coming into the season, drafted him everywhere at a discount. Didn't do anything until the season was over, and then became arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL during the playoffs. That's my boy Romeo Doubs. Now, there was a Christian Watson came in, obviously exploded with Aaron Rodgers down the stretch last year. Makes sense. Caught all the touchdowns. I get it. Romeo Doubs was hurt during that time. Rodgers leaves. We have the offseason. During the offseason this year, there was immediate reports that Romeo Doubs and Jordan Love were besties. All right. And they were like neighbors in the house where Cooper Kupp and Matt Stafford have breakfast. They were like the next room over eating brunch together as well. Then you had more injuries, and it just didn't come to fruition. Christian Watson becomes back healthy. You had the run game healthy. The Packers start slow. Jordan Love starts slow, what have you. Then all of a sudden they start picking up steam, and then Romeo Doubs gets hurt again. Then you see him during the back half of the season, and Romeo Doubs finally has a handful of weeks available. Now, of course, in my championship game, he let me down, unfortunately, but we're not going to dwell on that. Let's look at the positives here. He was fourth in the NFL with 8 touchdowns, so not quite double digits, but he did have 8 touchdowns. Jayden Reed also had 8 touchdowns, by the way, folks. Jayden Reed came out of nowhere, in my opinion. I didn't see him. Our resident Packer fan can let us know if we should have seen that coming. I didn't, because we were all focused on Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson, and Donald Driver, obviously, and some of the other greats there in Green Bay. But Jayden Reed outpaced across the board statistically. But when it came to the playoffs and when it came to crunch time, it was Romeo Doubs by a mile, and Jayden Reed was nowhere to be found. I mean, literally basically disappeared. 6 for 6, 151, and a touchdown in the first game for Romeo Doubs, which is he had a Packers playoff high with reception yards. And then in the next one, he was 8 for 83, or 4 for 83, excuse me, in the second game there versus the Niners. So a lot to be said, I think, for a player who had the hype coming in, sketchy midseason, but then finished strong as well. I know Christian Watson has the size and the athleticism. I know Jayden Reed's got the Debo effect, if you will, rushing the ball for fantasy points. But I think the true number one wide receiver for Jordan Love is Romeo Doubs. Now, I think you could be the number one wide receiver for a team and not necessarily for fantasy. If Jayden Reed stays healthy and he runs the ball the way that he does and catches the ball like this, he probably will have the most fantasy points there. And obviously Christian Watson has the touchdown upside, but I'm sticking with it. I had it early this season and it didn't come to fruition for about 15 weeks, but we're back at it. I'm going to claim Romeo Doubs is the number one wide receiver in Green Bay. It may be an overreaction because of the other auxiliary players there, but seeing him down the stretch when everybody else was healthy, game on the line, it was Romeo Doubs time and time again down the stretch. Matt, I'll turn back to you here as our resident Packer fan. Is Romeo Doubs the number one out there in Green Bay? Are they hoping Christian Watson gets back to 2022 form, or is Jayden Reed the new cat?
I think it's going to be week by week by week. And I think where you're going to make your money in drafting Green Bay Packers wide receivers is to figure out which one of the 3 you can get the latest in the draft. Watson is in discussions right now with team physicians to determine if he's going to just be healthy and get healthy or if he's going to have surgery. My guess is that he should go get the surgery, but I'm certainly about as far from a doctor as you can get. I think that if the doc says go get that and you'll be better going into 24, then go do that. But
what is the sorry to cut you off, Matt, but what's the job title of a person who is as far as possible away from a doctor? What would be the job title?
The government employee.
All right, got it. Okay.
Which I used to be that. I'm not that anymore. So actually, government contractor.
It's classified.
Government employee.
Classified. I like that.
I think that it's going to be every other week. It's going to be just like it was with New England, like it was periodically with the 49ers, especially this year. And then you're going to get the Tampa, the Godwin Evans thing that you don't know who's going to be the guy each week. So to me, I think the discounted player is going to probably be Doubs, but I think he could finish the season as Green Bay's wide receiver 1. Watson still has name value. People remember 7 touchdowns in 3 games. And they know that Jaden Reed was this Swiss Army knife, Debo Light type guy. So I think you just be quiet about Doubs, go into your draft season. If Reed and Doubs go first, then you take Watson a couple rounds later. But I think that the one guy you're going to get some type of discount is going to be Doubs. If the draft happens tomorrow, you're not going to get a discount on Doubs. You're going to get a discount on Reed because he shit the bed in the playoffs, which seemed to be game script. I don't know. He just was not involved. Watson is still dinged. So I think you go with the guy you can get at a discount, and I think it will be Doubs when we get into the late summer and start to draft again.
Here's my overreaction to that.
Watch for the 2 tight ends in Green Bay.
If Doubs is the number 1 for Green Bay, then Green Bay will next year will be Jacksonville of this year if Doubs is the number 1. There's my take.
Like they're not even going to make the playoffs. Like Derek, we're trying to keep Matt on the program. Like that, what we're trying to do is go week to week with Matt involved.
Aaron Jones is a year older. Yeah, write that down, Matt. There's my prediction for the year. If Doubs is the number 1 in Green Bay, that's the prediction. Now, I mean, he reminds me of another former Packer that Matt will certainly have an affection for, and that's Randall Cobb. You remember Randall Cobb? He would get through the regular season, all of a sudden he just shows up and blows up in the playoffs. Back when the Packers were in the playoffs. So that's what Doubs reminds me of this year. I mean, he only had 8. He had 8 games where he had 7 or less fantasy points, and he only had 2 games all season where he had double-digit targets. And so, certainly he had a couple good games in the playoffs. 12 targets, 10 receptions for 230 odd yards and a touchdown. I mean, those, obviously recency bias, we're going to think about that. But if you take his whole season under a microscope and look at it, there's really not a lot there to look at or to like. And Sky, you kind of mentioned that, living through the season, with Doubs on the roster, it was kind of painful. And, 2 games in the playoffs. I mean, if he can build that momentum and come out, on fire next year, then, that's great. But I don't think I'm in on that one.
Yes, Matt.
Okay, Derek, I love you. So this is hard for me, but remember what I said in my article, and I've said it to you guys offline. And we're going to be that organization that doesn't hide our secrets, right? So if people that we play with in leagues, if they want to follow our strategy, they can do that. I think we put everything in front of the paywall. Sky, you were 1 year early on Doubs. What did we agree? You want to be 1 year early versus 1 year late. So that tells me that next year is Doubs' year.
Ooh.
You know what? I think it's more about Jordan Love for me. He just looks legit. Like Jordan Love, when you watch him, you're like, okay, I want to invest in, because you're going to get these guys at discounts because none of them really blew up. The weirdest part is if you combine the stats of every other receiver in the playoffs, they're not even close to Romeo Doubs. He was an alpha. Like he legitimately helped them win a playoff game, which is impressive. But you're going to get a discount on these guys because what we're talking about right now is like, they didn't have the best seasons. No one had 1,000 yards. No one was even close. Jaden Reed was the emerging star. Maybe he hit a rookie wall. Doesn't show up in the playoffs. But what it really tells me is like, these are the kind of guys I want to take in the 8th, 9th, 10th round because I believe in their quarterback. I believe in the head coach. And I'm willing to take the upside play because if they flop and they finish where they finished this year, I'm only going to probably have to spend an 8th, 9th, 10th round pick on these guys and maybe even later for Doubs and stuff. So that's like the perfect pick for me because if Jordan Love takes another step next year, these guys are going to they're going to crush their ADP. And speaking of Aaron Jones like is another one where if you watch those games, I don't even know how I don't think it's out of the second round anymore, personally.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point, Bobby. But let me just throw back at you. What young quarterback a year ago, right now, were we saying the same thing about?
Trevor Lawrence.
Trevor Lawrence. Yeah.
Brock Purdy.
But you also added in Calvin Ridley. Like Calvin Ridley came in and he threw a wrench in that whole thing because he demanded more targets than Marvin Jones did, and you still had Zay Jones and Christian Kirk, and also the question is like, what is it, like Dontavian Wicks could be a problem because Wicks, people are talking about him with his route running is elite. Then you got Reed. Then you got Christian Watson, who has the pedigree. So there might be too many mouths to feed. I guess my point is like, that's what's going to hold their draft capital down. Like none of us are going to probably know unless like the camp reports and the preseason pops off and one of these guys is emerging. But even still, we're going to get discounts on these guys. So I'm okay with missing if it ends up being like a timeshare or a committee. Maybe Matt's right. You take the one the latest, but after watching what Doubs did in the playoffs, I would love to do research on playoff production and see how it impacts fantasy football the next year because he was like dominant. Like it was, and every third down, like he wanted to go to Doubs. In the red zone, he goes to Doubs. So, I feel like I'm going to take a shot on that.
He trusts him, and that matters. Let's be clear here, folks. My overreaction is that Romeo Doubs is the number one wide receiver in Green Bay. Please don't read that as me saying he's a wide receiver one in fantasy football. Right? Or that maybe he's the number one fantasy target or producer in Green Bay. There's a lot to go around. Musgrave didn't even play this year, right? So like you have a lot of opportunity for these guys. What happens with AJ Dillon? Does Aaron Jones continue to, dominate with this team? So we'll see what happens there, but lots of upside for the Green Bay football Packers.